Well, Julia, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I know you're doing a great deal of work across capital markets to, amongst other things, help support access to UK markets for people across the UK. Why does this matter to the London Stock Exchange and what does that mean?
Well, look, the London Stock Exchange can be seen by a lot of people as something that's very esoteric, it's a long way away from their lives, and it doesn't matter to them. And I actually worry about that. It's a challenge that we have to overcome. In reality, the stock exchange is financing people's lives up and down this country. It's providing the capital that goes into the companies that employ them. It's providing the capital that goes into the R&D that solves problems that they face in their lives. And it's also creating value that they have the opportunity to have the exposure to generate more wealth and more income for themselves and a more prosperous retirement. And so it's not something alien to any person walking up and down any street in this country. It should be something that they think of as an enabler for the life that they want to have. And that's not just on the equity side, it's also on the debt side. The debt that we list on our markets is financing schools and hospitals, not only in the UK, but around the world. The first green gilt that came onto our market has been invested in making remarkable change to our green transition as a country. That's what the instruments that we list on our markets do.
Yeah.
The challenge we have for retail in this country has been that they have had less and less access to be able to invest in equities and bonds over the course of the last 20 or 30 years. We've, through good intention, made it harder and harder for retail to participate in our markets. And the reason it matters to me is I want everybody to feel they've got a stake in the economy, that not only are they helping it grow, but they're benefiting from having an increase in their prosperity when it does grow.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we need to shift in the UK. Now, there is a remarkable amount of regulatory change going on to do that, but the problem statement is real. There are £430 billion invested in cash in this country by retail that isn't going into what we would call productive assets, which is investing in the next generation of companies or in solving infrastructural investment for the green economy, for example. And that is often because retail find it difficult to navigate and difficult to understand how they take that money that they've invested in cash, sometimes in their ISAs, and turn it into investing into higher yielding, higher returning assets. That's one of the problems that we have to solve as a country. But actually the regulatory change that's going on at the moment, some of it being driven through the Capital Markets Industry Task Force, is actually making a huge change to try and crack that problem.
So you mentioned there the Capital Markets Industry Task Force. Can you talk around how that will increase retail participation in UK capital markets?
Well, let me describe what CMIT's for a start. CMIT operates to a very simple vision statement, which is how do we create the best possible environment in this country for great companies to start here, grow here, scale here, and stay here? And how do we make sure our capital markets have the best possible assets for our policyholders, our pensioners, and our savers to have enough money for life events and old age? At its core, it's a retail statement. You know, not only how do we create the financing for companies so that people up and down this country can work in them and prosper, but also so that they've got the right assets to invest in so that they can have a prosperous retirement and have access to money when they need it. The simple reality is we've made that friction harder in the UK. And so, but the aspiration is held by government, it's held by regulators, it's held by the industry. And the trick is how do we make that evolution work? Now, Barclays has been doing some brilliant research. Barclays are a member of the Capital Markets Industry Task Force, and we have stood up a retail workstream that they're leading on. And they've published a lot of research that actually illustrates some of the gaps in terms of retail investment in the UK, but also some of the simple things that we need to do to make it more straightforward to invest. One of the greatest challenges is how complicated it feels. And yet there are so many things that we do nowadays, and I suspect that also happens in cryptocurrencies as well, where we used to be able to take out our phone, follow a pretty simple workflow, and be able to transact. Our banking activity happens that way. We need to make sure that that ease of straightforwardness of access happens in the retail space as well. And that requires quite a lot of re-engineering in the way we've always done things, you know?
Yeah.
Let's start with the objective. The objective is retail should have a decent stake in our economy. Then the question is, how do you make sure that they can do that? And if that means we have to change our workflows and the way we work as an exchange, then we should be doing that as well.
And there's clearly a great deal of things happening across the retail trading and investing landscape. Is there one area that you're most excited about when you think about this sector? If you could pick one area, perhaps there could be more.
It's very hard to pick one. Because as with all ecosystems, it requires legal access for retail to be able to buy the products, the assets. It shouldn't ever, and I have said this many times, it should never have been easier for retail to go into a corner shop in Hackney and buy a cryptocurrency from a cash point than it was to subscribe for a share in an IPO on the London Stock Exchange. Now, the cryptocurrency cash points are shut down now, but it isn't yet quite easy enough for retail to participate in IPOs and secondaries. So you need to solve that problem. Then you need to make sure that they have access to the research and the understanding of these companies, and you need to make sure that they've got the platforms where they can invest and they can understand the assets and the products available to them. One of the things I'm most excited about, though, is actually how we create that investing landscape on the London Stock Exchange, making sure that it's possible for retail to trade on exchange. At the moment, most retail who trade in London Stock Exchange listed securities actually trade off exchange and then report it to us. But if we can actually have the ability for retail to interact with the liquidity that the big institutions use every day, then we're also adding, I think, particular value to retail investors in the UK. So that's something that I know we're working on. I know that's something that we're looking to develop. But that is, I think, a pretty significant change in holding ourselves accountable to say, it's one thing to say you care about retail enfranchisement, what are you actually doing about retail enfranchisement? And that, to me, is a critical question that we always have to ask ourselves.
Yeah. Well, look, leads me to say thank you so much for your time, and it sounds like a really exciting future for retail.
I hope so. Thank you very much, Will.